Hi everybody. Thank you for being here. For those of you that don't know me, I am Elizabeth. I am the KGI Alumni Officer. If you ever need to reach the Alumni Office, you can do so on Instagram, LinkedIn, email. All of them come to me. And so I'm happy to help support you and direct you to however you need. I'd like to welcome you to our first virtual Beaker speakers, which essentially is our industry talks, but now elevated, focusing on our alumni in industry and the different paths and patterns and jobs and roles that they've done. So we'll be focusing on kind of hot topics in a panel style, but the idea is to focus on our alumni that are working in the fields. And so this week and the next week, we're doing AI. This week is AI in implementation, and next week is AI in business. AI was just so expansive, we decided to kind of chop it up into different subsegments. So with that, I'd like to kick it over to Ryan Peeler, who will be our moderator. He's going to do a brief intro for himself, then Arun and Jessica, and then we're going to get started. I'll be moderating questions in the chat, but we'll also have a session for a Q&A as well. And so with that, Ryan, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Elizabeth. And welcome, everyone. It's my honor and my pleasure to moderate this. Um, I'll, as Elizabeth said, I'll briefly introduce myself and talk a little bit about my connection to KGI, and then I will pass it off to Arun, and then we'll jump over to Jessica. So, in my backstory leading up to KGI was my undergraduate work was in biology and genetics. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life when I finished college. So I worked in a genetics lab for a little bit and then found out about KGI and then started in 2005 and graduated in 2007 with an MBS. And I still wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And I had met some folks at KGI and we started this company. A tech company that did social network analytics, and we sold that in 2021. And I worked at the acquiring company for a couple of years and then did some consulting afterward in AI implementations. And then recently I worked at a continuing medical education company, and now I work at a health and wellness company as a VP of business insights, and it's focused on underserved communities. It's called BlackDoctor.org. So I will, with that, pass it off to Arun, and if you would share your KGI connection and anything that may be interesting that's out of scope of AI implementations that you want to while you're introducing yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it. I'm excited to be here. So my name is Arun Ravi. I'm a computer engineer by background. Same thing. I didn't know what to do after undergrad. Kind of worked around the world and the Middle East and India and then England, and then basically came back to the U.S. Was trying to figure out whether I was going to do an MS in bioengineering. Came across KGI. Seemed really interesting, mixing kind of the engineering and the business aspect. And so I was Ryan's classmate. We actually graduated together in 2007. After that, joined Frost and Sullivan, so did some consulting, but I was in the Bay Area, wanted to do tech, so I started my own company. We raised money from Mayo Clinic and Launchpad Digital Health, and we got acquired. After we got acquired, I was kind of like approached by Amazon, and so I joined the Special Projects group. And in that, ended up creating the Healthy AI group at AWS. And so AWS Healthy AI, we started with like 5 people. Now it's like 250, so pretty big org now. After that, moved to Microsoft. So I'm in the Microsoft, I'm a senior director of product in the Microsoft Health AI org. My major product that, kind of help run is and Ezra, you talked about the Scribe, but it's basically the Dragon Copilot, which is basically physician patient conversations that get automated into a clinical note. So we built a Copilot around that. I also own a couple of Azure services as well in the AI space. And yeah, excited to chat.
Thanks, Arun. Jessica, do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. Hi everyone. I'm Jessica Bugarin. I'm a master's in human genetics and genomic data analytics graduate. I graduated in 2022. Since then, I was fortunate enough to be hired by Genomenon right after graduation, and I've been with them ever since. I'm also heavily involved in the genomic data analytics program at KGI. I came back and I am now adjunct faculty and I teach a variant curation course, which is what I do in my line of work. Yeah, excited to be here today.
Very
Yes,
cool.
go
Well,
MSGDA.
you're even getting shout outs in the
Yeah.
chat already. All right. Yeah, so the goal for this is hopefully to be informative, possibly entertaining, and beyond that, that hopefully you'll walk away with everyone involved will walk away having learned something. So I'll kick it off with the first question, and I'll maybe prompt you to answer first, Jessica, if you will. But can you share a specific AI implementation that you're working on right now or recently, and what kind of problem that solves?
In the variant curation space, essentially what we do is we have to review a lot of genetic literature. That's my main everyday work at Genomenon. And sometimes there are studies that are a little bit more complicated. We curate gene by gene, so we curate all the variants in a given gene at a time. You really have to familiarize yourself with gene and disease mechanism and everything. And so we'll use AI to help us like write gene summaries and find information on genes. And if we have a particularly complex paper, like something with a lot of functional data that maybe we're not super familiar with the assay or what the actual results of the study were, maybe they weren't super clear. We have some AI prompts that we've been using. We've been using Perplexity specifically to feed that paper in and ask, what is actually happening in this paper? What is the relevant effect that the variant is having on this gene and so forth. That's something we're kind of tinkering with right now to help us as curators so that we can curate and classify genetic variants as accurately as possible.
Very cool. I'll send the same question your way, Arun. What
Okay.
what are you working on?
Yeah, so I think like I'll give you a professional and a personal answer because I think there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with AI. So professionally, a lot of the work right now my team is doing is around the Dragon Copilot. So what we're doing is basically physician-patient conversations get converted to clinical note. Now, clinical notes are the source of truth in EHRs. Now, what else can you do, right? I think the biggest thing is that you can do stuff from revenue, your revenue cycle management. You can extract the codes, send that to a payer. But I think the biggest thing that we're trying to do is like, how do you create the agent framework around it so that you can create like, using MCP, which is a protocol to have these agents talking to each other to take away some of the heavy lift in the workflow that exists in the provider ecosystem. But that's, again, very provider specific. We're also looking at areas in real world evidence and, again, looking at how we can enable pharma to go through a lot of their workflows that they do, like adverse drug events is another great example of giving that to the FDA. And I think there's a lot of stuff with the FDA that can be done around AI. But we're basically, I mean, as Microsoft, we're trying to create the buyer builder persona. As a builder, you build, we have the services. As a buyer, you can buy it, which is like the Dragon Copilot. So we're kind of approaching it from two sides. Personally, I built a chatbot for fantasy football. I don't know if there's any fantasy football fans, but I am testing kind of a better methodology of getting that information and stack ranking it. I think the biggest problem is the APIs that I'm pulling the information from, they're rate limiting me, which is annoying. So, but it's actually getting better. So that's something, personally I'm doing with AI. That's fun.
Cool. I'll chip in mine as well. So I've most recently been working on um, a lot of the stakeholders that I work with ask a lot of questions of data from this data lake house that we have and stuff like that. And it is the perfect time in history to start building. Um, I won't go so far as to say an agentic solution, but a sort of a chat solution where you can have an enterprise walled garden where people can chat with the data itself, so they can say, if I'm interested in convening an educational program in the Phoenix, Arizona area for cardiologists. Who should I reach out to? And it can come through our database. Instead of having to do filters, you can, in plain language, ask the question and then get a dashboard that has a map and practice locations and information about publications that people you might want to invite have been involved in, or clinical trials they've been involved in. So it kind of gives you an instantaneous, fresh 360 view of whatever questions you had about a person or a topic or an area or something like that.
On
Um,
AWS or
I'll
Azure? On AWS or Azure?
neither.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
I was
yeah,
dreading the answer, but
no. I previously I'd done something similar. It was on Databricks on AWS, and
uh,
then currently I'm doing it on GCP.
right.
So we can
Can
we can
I,
talk about that later.
as a novice, and maybe there are other people, can you explain, Arun, why you asked that question?
Oh, because Azure is Microsoft, AWS is Amazon, and GCP is Google. So, just I mean, obviously, as Microsoft, we want builders to build on our ecosystem with the Azure services. So that's why I was asking that.
Um, I'll ask a little bit of a follow-up question. And Arun, you got into this a little bit in your answer, but Jessica, I'm curious for you to unpack yours a little bit. And the question is about um, who uses it and the reaction to sort of an AI system or solution. And Arun, I think yours might be tricky because there's an enterprise answer and there's like an individual answer.
Yeah. I mean, Jessica, why don't you go first? I can...
Oh, yeah, sure. So we're kind of just in the testing phases of it. I mean, obviously AI is like a really hot topic right now, and we want to get to the forefront of it as much as possible, just because we do integrate kind of like machine learning models and other things into our curation workflow to help us, better identify variants in papers and identify whether or not we have a case study or a functional paper or a mix of both or a review article or something like that. So we've been training models to do that for a while. But it came to our attention that some of the newer curators at Genomenon were using AI tools to help them curate. And so to get ahead of that and kind of help them from, maybe accidentally viewing hallucinations as real answers or yeah, just knowing how to ask the right questions to the AI tool so that you're not leading it along to get a certain answer. So we've kind of put together a little AI group within our company where myself and other curators and individuals on our QA team who review our curations, and we kind of come together and we just test different prompts and different tools and kind of share that information with each other because it makes us nervous that, we're putting out these curations. We have our product is Mastermind, and basically what that is, it's the Google of human genomics, is what I like to call it. So curators like myself, we curate variants and genes, and then we upload those curations into our database. And so, because we have ownership over those curations, we want to make sure we're putting out the most accurate information possible. So actually teaching the team to use AI appropriately in certain situations has been a big thing we've been working on recently. So there's a bunch of us that have been kind of involved. So yeah.
So for me, at least with the physician use case, I mean, it was so we bought a company called Nuance, and they have been doing, speech to text and a lot of this stuff around, front-end dictation, which is essentially like a physician dictating the clinical note versus the ambient is, we're having a conversation that's getting converted to a clinical note. So it was a tried and tested use case. Bringing AI to it was, there were some AI elements of it, but making an AI service or AI product out of it was actually very easy. I think the biggest thing is that like once you get there, and I'll talk about the provider space and the pharma space because there's definitely a lot of differences there. But within the provider space, providers' margins are razor thin. They can't really invest in technology. A lot of them are not in the cloud right now. And so like in the end, all of the stuff that we can bring to them is kind of blocked because obviously compliance security, there's a lot of things around HIPAA as well. So we know what use cases we can get in. I think what the struggle is like, how do we expand on that? And if we expand on that, can they pay for it? Because any AI service that is launched, it's almost like a depreciating asset. It only gets cheaper in price as time goes on. And so if your margins aren't baked in well enough, as you scale, you actually lose money, right? And so you have to spread your bets and make sure you're betting across the ecosystem in order to create the right revenue goals, right? Especially for a company of Microsoft, you got to go at 10x, 20x of what, your expectations are. So I think there's a lot of those nuances based on the use case. On the pharma side, I think it's very interesting because pharma is prime for AI innovation, and the reason is they've been adopting cloud technology for a very long time. Whether it's compute or whether it's databases, they've been using it for a very, very long time. The problem that we're seeing there is every therapeutic area within a pharma company has a different approach to AI, and consolidating it into a single approach is super difficult. I did a panel with Amgen recently where honestly I couldn't give them advice on how to deploy AI because they didn't have a data strategy. And so unless you have a data strategy, it's impossible to say like this is what you can do. So I think like there's different things that we're working on, but again, it comes down to the builder buyer persona that we try to kind of rationalize everything against.
I kind of a follow-up question to both of you. I've been in situations where a coworker has reached out and said, "Oh, can we use AI to do this thing?" And very often, my the, the unfiltered version of what my response would have been is like, "You can just write a Python script or something that'll do that." Like, so I think the question that I'll pose to both of you is, what made, in particular cases, what made AI the right tool to use instead of another method?
So it's actually really funny that you bring up Python. So I'm kind of intermediate. Throughout the MSGDA program, we get some exposure to Python and also R. But I was really interested in taking my Python knowledge further, and so I've actually used ChatGPT to help me with some of my Python scripts before. I'm not a part of our development team. We have a development team that's in charge of all of that, but sometimes us as curators, there's some processes that could be more easily done by a script. And so I've actually used ChatGPT to help me write scripts before. But honestly, I mean, if AI is helping curators get to a correct answer, then I have no problem with them, asking if they can use it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think for us, like, I mean, with any product that Microsoft puts out, it has to have, reliability, security, scalability, like all this kind of big tech stuff that has to like be associated with it. So if we're going after a workflow, specific AI workflow, I mean, number one, it has to be scalable, the certain revenue goals that we hit. But I think the thing that we're trying to do more and become better at is be nimble at experimentation because AI is changing so quickly, in terms of like the models, the model improvement, you have to like benchmark your models and, healthcare data is messy. And so there's a lot of stuff that we have to constantly do to make sure that we're keeping up. And the advantage with that, it's allowing for more experimentation. So Ryan, to your point, if I'm like, okay, is this AI workflow going to work? I can actually use, Claude or, use, GPT-5o or, whatever, or GPT-5 rather, to, create something, go show it to the customer, kind of validate it, and then say, okay, fine. Now let's make this a scalable version because we're able to get enough feedback in real time. I think there's very few companies right now that are built that way, at least in big tech, to be that quick. And just because of all the things you need to do if you're going, because I mean, it's very easy to sue Microsoft, right? So you want to make sure you put something out that has the the right trademark and the promises that we're giving and the trust that we're giving to customers. But it's a fast cycle now, which is exciting.
And another kind of thank you for that. Another programming note is, Elizabeth is going to be monitoring the chat, and so if a question that's relevant to the topic comes up, then I think we'll address those as we go with the panel chipping in answers, and then any sort of larger or questions that aren't directly addressing the topic we're discussing, we'll address those in the Q&A at the end. So Jared had a question in the chat, which was, what data strategy would you look for with AI? Does the company need to collect more data points or more on being standardized data collection across the company? And
Yeah, so the latter, I think, would go. Sorry, I'm looking at the question. Yeah, the latter. So the problem is that like they have a lot of unstructured data that needs to be structured. So you do use natural language processing structured out. There's a bunch of APIs that you can actually use to do that. I think the problem is that like I mean, just as an example, like if, within oncology, non-small cell lung cancer, that group can do it, and then but the other groups need to do it in order to create a universal company-wide data strategy. And I think like at least to my knowledge, like I don't see any chief data officers or data science officers in a lot of pharma companies, which I think like I'm starting to see in a lot of other tech companies. But yeah, it's basically whatever it is, whatever tooling you're using, saying this is the tooling we're going to use. This is going to work across all our therapeutic areas, and we're going to use this to create a data store that's, properly segmented and available and searchable, and it could be used across the company. I think like no one is doing that. I think a lot of it is also like how these companies are structured, but I think eventually they're going to have to figure out a centralized way of approaching it if they truly want the AI to be effective at a company level, right?
Jessica, you have a really specific and proprietary data set that you work with. How would you approach that same question?
I would say likewise, and I mean, I guess that's why we've kind of decided to put together this AI committee that we have amongst the more senior curators to try to, standardize prompts and make sure everybody's on the same page with the AI that we're using. So yeah, I pretty much agree with Arun.
Yeah, in my experience, like in the medical education space, we had um, tuned a bunch of custom GPTs to function in oncology specific workflows. And when someone from a neurology team said, "Oh, can I try some of those?" Like it just wasn't working because they had different knowledge bases and all sorts of different um, complicating factors that made one team's workflow just completely useless to another team. Ezra, I see your hand is up. Did you want to ask a question?
Hi, thank you, Ryan. Yes, I did. And it's sort of it has to do with the frustration that I had in the laboratory setting. And you're talking about introducing uh, sort of a data curator type position. In my time working in labs, I had to navigate all these limb systems, and many of them are crap. And I was wondering, I kind of wanted to get, I guess, your opinion on how to implement AI into a limb system like this and make it useful. I see like, there's a lot of problems with um, these limb systems, like connecting to old instruments, or maybe we can like cut out a lot of data curation along the way by having AI sort the data and present a report or something. Is this type of implementation feasible?
I think so. I mean, in the end, you can get these systems to spit out data in a CSV file, right? Like and a CSV file can become an Excel file. An Excel file is still discrete data that you can throw into a model, right? I think what happens is that so I mean, I don't want to get too technical, but like there are NoSQL databases that you can actually put this in and search. And so there are products like so the companies like Snowflake and Databricks, what they do is they try to extrapolate discrete data and put it in a way that's easily searchable, right? If you can get the data out of that system and if it's discrete, that gives you the huge advantage. Like so the contrary point to that is that if it's unstructured data, then it becomes a lot more difficult because then you have to apply some sort of filter to structure that data and then put it into those systems. But as long as you can get the data out, there are many ways to kind of make it usable. It just honestly, the biggest issue I see in healthcare broadly with this is that the tech exists. Getting it down to the people who actually need to implement it has been like a huge struggle. And that knowledge, once it's created, is never shared. And so once, just say that person leaves, then everything, they just scrap the whole project, right? So I think there's definitely ways to solution for it, but yeah, I think there's other issues that impact doing it at scale.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and this AI boom is it kind of rhymes with the technology history where like when genomics was first taking off and everyone had um, there were a lot of really big promises that came with that, like, oh, they've sequenced a genome, great. Now we can, you know, do these magical things that maybe eventually would happen. So I we'll get a little bit more brass tacks on some implementation type topics, but and maybe I will go with you first on this one, Jessica. But can you walk us through an implementation process from I would say like not even a concept to something that is near deployment or has been deployed?
Yeah, so I mean, we have a few things that we've been working on. So, kind of a I don't want to say a big problem, but a problem that hasn't isn't super like fleshed out is related to pseudogenes in curation. So basically, pseudogenes are inactive versions of genes that have over time, through like a duplication of a gene, become inactive due to mutations and no selective pressure. But that can cause a big false positive for variant curation because, for example, a gene like PMS2, if we're sequencing a patient and they have a variant that is in that gene, that would obviously, if it's in the pseudogene and not the actual gene, it may not actually be clinically relevant. And so that would change the course of action for that patient. So essentially here, I built a pseudogene aligner from the ground up with the help of AI tools because there's nothing really out there that'll do that for you. And so we have to be really careful about curating pseudogenes. And so basically, yeah, so I use GPT to kind of help me write a script that would do this aligner, help me find like good packages that would do sequence alignment. I had to do a lot of digging to find like a pseudogene like database type of thing where there's actual pseudogene sequences being held. And so that's something that we're currently working on right now is using a combination of AI and my script and like a visualizer tool to help find the homology between pseudogenes and then change the way we curate certain genetic variants based on that information and how prevalent or homologous other pseudogenes are. And that's something that's really complicated too, because a lot of times authors, especially in older publications where pseudogenes may not have been, known or even talked about, it's just good to note for whoever's interpreting a variant in a gene that has a pseudogene that that might be an issue and could be a false positive. So that's something that I've been working on recently.
And over to you, Arun. Do you want to talk a little bit about the process that you and your team go through from idea to deployment?
Yeah, and I think it's changed quite a bit, but I'm very I'm an ex-Amazonian, so we do PRFAQs. I mean, we write the press releases before we launch the product. We try to understand what the business impact is going to be, what the scalability of it, what your competitors. So like, I mean, basically it's a six pager that we review. We do this with science, engineering, product, everyone the same, leadership. And once we feel like, okay, we have something that can be created, we're like, all right, what does our MVP look like? And so we create the MVP, we go into private preview. Private preview, our aim is like 3 to 5 customers that are willing to pay. Once we go from there, we go from private to public to GA. And so there's like this long drawn out process. Depending on the type of service and where it lands, like if it's landing more in the I don't know, the commerce side, which is very similar to Office products, it's a different kind of workflow. But if it's an Azure service, it's again a different workflow. But I think like the main thing is that what's happening is our ideation is happening a lot faster now because of AI. We're using AI to help us as well with some of the ideation, so that's been extremely useful. I think the biggest thing is, and I'll say this, and this may be a little controversial, but I think like we're coming to a space where it's become easy to create a lot of solutions, but no one is really understanding what the business behind it is. There's tons of startups that are out there that are pouring money into AI. They may have a high top line, but their margins are crap. And in the end, those are not sustainable businesses in the long term, right? So like in the end, at least for my team and what I control, I try to like make sure our unit economics work so that at scale you actually create profitable businesses because that's how you grow. So there's people have different opinions on that, growth strategy versus like being profitable and strategy and stuff like that. But yeah, I do what I can to control my team. So
Yeah, from my perspective, in three different companies working, building essentially internal tools that help with pipelines and workflows. Generally, the costs don't run out of control because it's not like this user outside world facing thing where suddenly you have 10 million users or something like that. But um, pretty much in every case, it started with you're lucky if you start with someone who's imaginative and says there may be an AI solution to this pain point that I have, but most of the time I've found that being able to ask the right question to someone can elicit uh, what their pain points are, or if they're very very good at articulating that, then maybe what they would like to see as a solution to those pain points. And I think this is pretty common in software, but like don't jump into a solution too quickly. Jump into um, what is the problem? What are we trying to solve for? And pretty much any of oh, 10 years from now, I'm going to regret saying this, I think, but pretty much all of the foundational models are equivalent in most regards to solving a majority of the types of problems that need to be solved. So starting with some kind of idea, and then the rest of it is textbook. Like Arun said, where you get to an MVP as quickly as you can, get feedback on that, and then deploy. And then one thing that's interesting about AI solutions that I think are different from a lot of software solutions is they're all the bugs happen up front, and then later it just I feel like there's not as much cruft or problems that build up because the whole thing hinges on a model that is continuously updated and getting better. That's a generalization, I guess, but um, the I wanted to also pivot into yet another topic that I think relates back to KGI largely, and I'll use the terminology patient outcomes, but we can also go more broadly to say people who affect patient outcomes or those types of things. But do you have? I'll start with you, Arun, and we'll follow up with you, Jessica. Same question. Can you share a concrete example of how your AI work has improved patient outcomes or accelerated discovery, or sometimes both of those?
yeah, I mean that's a good question. I think like sometimes it's hard to get that individual feedback. I mean, one thing is that like we've gotten a lot of feedback from physicians who are burnt out and just basically struggling to do their day-to-day job, and thankful that they don't have to keep doing documentation at the end of the day when they're done with their patients. What is really interesting is that if you go to the doctor, you think your average visit is maybe 45 minutes, but it's actually 10 to 15, right? Like that's actually how much is actually captured by the model. So in the end, they're seeing a lot more patients and dealing with a lot more documentation. And I know we'll get to the Epic question, but Epic is incredibly unintuitive. And so like it's not like they're dealing with, the best of the best from a technology perspective. So I think that's one thing. The other side that we're seeing, and this is our AI platform. It's called Foundry, and I think we have an effort, and actually Satya talked about it a few months ago around foundation models, large frontier foundation models, and these are models then in radiology, pathology, different areas that are kind of 80% of the way there, and customers can customize and deploy it. We're seeing a lot of impact on patients there, especially like in imaging, right? I mean, AI and imaging has been there for like 2 decades, right? But like it's all been segmentation. Now, if you have actually the patient data and you have the images, we're able to do a lot more there. And I think we're giving customers the flexibility of deploying at scale with kind of, again, the reliability, they don't have to worry about spinning up their own compute, everything is covered. We're seeing a lot of impact there, but again, it's at a broader level. I think where we're making the most impact right now is at the physician level, like helping them do their job better, which we're very proud of.
Related to imagery, I heard something really fascinating the other day. friend of mine who is an oncologist was talking about these add-on services that you can get with specifically mammography, but I think it's with other types of imaging as well, where you can pay a little extra to have, in addition to your radiologist review it, to have like an AI
Mhm.
version of a radiologist review it, which is kind of interesting.
Definitely.
All right, Jessica, over to you. Can you talk about a concrete example of how AI or your work with AI has improved patient outcomes or accelerated discovery?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, we've worked really hard to create a really special genomic language processing program that basically allows us at Genomenon to identify all public or all published instances of every variant and every single gene that's out there. And so that's one of the biggest bottlenecks for curation is actually going through and finding genetic variants in the literature, just because there's so many different ways variants can be referred to. With older nomenclature, before things became standardized, there's different transcripts, so on and so forth. So, um, when a normal laboratory goes through and maybe searches manually for these things using PubMed or something like that, they may not catch all the data that's on a variant out there and may not even find that it's published. So we have a lot more variants in our database than, say, ClinVar, for example. ClinVar is a free resource that publishes human genetic variants, but we're able to identify more of those. And so, kind of a recent example, we were working with a pharmaceutical company who was they were trying to develop inclusion criteria for a drug for Fabry disease, and so that's caused by variants in GLA. And so we were actually able to curate more variants and get them to a pathogenic classification, which basically allowed more patients to get enrolled in this trial because they became eligible once they found out that they had this patient that before their variant was of uncertain significance, but we were able to find more information, curate it to pathogenic, and now they're able to be included in this clinical trial with this drug that could, drastically improve their lives. And so yeah, that's one of my favorite instances of something that we've done because I think it's really awesome that we were able to help, patients basically gain access to medication that they might otherwise may have never been able to receive due to inclusion criteria.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
All right. We're going to pivot into sage advice territory from our AI practitioners before we jump um, into the Q&A. But um, we'll start with you, Jessica. What do you know now that you wish you had known when you started?
Um, well, I
Specifically regarding implementation. Sorry, that's very, very broad.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Yeah, so I mean, I would consider myself, I guess, maybe novice or intermediate level, especially probably compared to you guys. I haven't been, my career is long. But we joke, that with AI, kind of when we were starting out, that it's almost like throwing spaghetti at the wall and then just seeing kind of like what sticks. And so, yeah, so it's been tricky to find tools that work. Not every AI tool is going to be perfect. And also, you do have to have some knowledge of, what you're searching or what you're trying to do with AI. Not that you necessarily have to be a subject matter expert, but you can't just go in, blind and say, you've never written a script before in your life, for example, and then you're asking it to write a script for you, and you're like, okay, well, I'm not familiar with this. It's like a different language, right? So you do kind of have to have some knowledge ahead of time for what you're trying to get AI to do. It's not a, I guess, a replacement for human knowledge. It's just there to help you and should be viewed as such, and everything should be taken with a grain of salt when you're using AI. So,
Yeah. What does Guru Arun tell young Arun?
Oh man. I think I think the biggest thing, and I've been saying this actually even before the whole Gen AI stuff started. Like AI is there to give you a superpower, depending on the workflow that you're doing. Address it that way. I think it's the interesting thing about ChatGPT being, one of the fastest growing products ever is that, my dad's able to use it, right? Like in the sense that like that sort of being able to touch it and use it has never existed, which is amazing. And so there's obviously a lot of excitement around it. But to Jessica's point, like you have to be very careful about what um what you actually get out of it. Because I mean, the internet contains a lot of hate and a lot of different things out there. There's a lot of stuff out there that this data is trained on that, may not work in a lot of real life examples. So I think like where we're moving towards is there going to be these base foundational models that we will have to customize with our own data because we believe that source of truth. And I think that, that's eventually where it's going, like these smaller language models that are focused on certain use cases that you can deploy that's cost effective. I think that's where everything is moving in. You can think of a small language model as an agent, essentially, right? Where I think it becomes super important is how these agents are interacting with each other because you still need a human in the loop, no matter what people say, right? I mean, if you need a travel itinerary to Italy, fine. But if you're trying to figure out why your claim was rejected, I think you'd want someone to look at it, right? So like I think it really depends on the type of use cases. But I think what is exciting is that it's you can build things very quickly. You can test things very quickly. Like take the tool for what it is, and it's a tool, right? Don't take it. It's not gonna change the way that we work. It's just gonna help us be a lot more efficient. So if you approach it that way, it becomes a lot easier to kind of wrap your head around it because things are moving very quickly. But I think the premise of the use case and what you're doing, if you can ground yourself on that, it makes it a lot more manageable in terms of what's happening.
Yeah. For myself, I think because in the early days of a lot of the stuff, I was a real sponge, and I think because it was the thing that I paid the most attention to for a non-trivial amount of time, um, I assumed that a lot of people had a similar baseline to what I did. And I was talking to a friend who works at like this large inference provider, and he was saying he was at like his kid's soccer game, and he was talking this, one of the parents of a kid on his son's team was like, "Oh, what do you do?" And he was like, "Oh, AI." And this is 6 months ago, and the person was like, "Oh, what's that?" He's like, "Oh, like Chat GPT," and the person was like, "Well, what is that?" And it's like it was mind blowing to him and mind blowing to me. And the more I thought about it and other interactions, like not everyone has the same baseline, and not everybody knows the same amount. And so the the more disconnected you become from who's going to use the thing that you implement, the harder it is to create a better solution. And I, in a previous role, I was working with MDs and PhDs who are just ridiculously intelligent at their their field, and you could lose them in an instant by talking about LoRa's or something like that. And um, it not losing touch with what someone wants to find the utility of AI for is kind of the advice that I would give myself. And I think it's a lesson I say I know now and I forget every couple of weeks and have to relearn. Um, let's let's talk about the exciting future of AI, and maybe why you think that it is or is not a bubble. But like specifically AI in healthcare, what's the most exciting thing for you in the future? And we'll start with Arun, and then we'll go to Jessica next. So you
It's a
can
good
be as broad as you want on this. I know it can be exhausting to think of all the possibilities. So pick whatever you want and just run with what excites you about it.
I mean, if just thinking, I'm excited about physical AI. Like in the end, can we, there was a cool project that we did when I was at AWS with Cerner about like patients falling in their inpatient rooms, and basically using image recognition as a way to send a notification to the nurse on staff to say, hey, this person is falling, or while they're falling, or create an alert. Or even like they had one of the ideas was that it would push like a not like a mattress, but like some sort of like air mattress that would catch the patient. I think there's a lot of stuff we can do in real time now that's super interesting. Medication cabinets, like within the provider ecosystem, I think a lot of the stuff that happens can, physical AI is going to be interesting. AI to medical devices, if I had to like stretch, would be super, super interesting because I don't think, Ryan, remember we did like the artificial pancreas project when we were, at KGI? Just think if we had like this type of AI for that, it would have been insane, right? So like I think stuff like that could be super, super interesting. I don't think it's gone there yet because everyone's still within, I think, phase 0 or phase 1 of using AI. But in the future, I think that could be really, really exciting.
All right, Jessica, what are you excited about?
Yeah,
Most
I mean,
excited about?
well, just something personal that I've actually dealt with recently. So, my grandmother's been really sick. She's on a bunch of different medications, and she's always afraid of like drug interactions. And she has AFib, and she has a history of colon cancer, and all these things. So she has a complicated medical history, and she's basically now scared to take any drug that her provider prescribes her, which understandably so, especially because she's had some nasty drug interactions in the past. So I think that there is a future for AI, maybe as kind of like a chatbot in a way to kind of like talk to a medical provider because it's really hard to get a hold of her doctors. And so, I mean, I've used ChatGPT to be like, hey, she's taking propranolol and Eliquis. Can she take this antibiotic with it or whatever? And obviously, I take it with a grain of salt, but I can, check the resources it's pulling. And so, just as like an additional resource for patients, especially because, doctors' office hours are limited, physicians are busy, and so on and so forth. So I think that could be a really cool direction that we could go towards for sure.
I'm going to be way less specific than either of you were, and just say the idea of um, AI, generative AI, being able to actually make discoveries that humans have not or could not is kind of fascinating to me. And then I had read this book years ago called The Age of EM, which EM is short for emulator, and it's an economist had written this um, really well-written book about the future where you have these emulations of human consciousness in silico, and you could create project teams that would go off. I mean, essentially describing agentic frameworks and stuff like that, and the ethical implications of the way you treat something if you believe it to be autonomous in some ways. And if I could get a project team to work 100 times faster than a human project team and never stop them working, like, should I give them a vacation at some point? And there's even stuff when you interact with LLMs now where you can bribe them by saying, I'll get you a coffee if you give me this answer faster. And it's all based on training for how humans would respond in similar situations. But I think this world of how we interact with something that can know and remember us and that we can carry with us as we go. And specifically in healthcare, there may be patterns of interaction that this confidant and advisor and whatever um, generative transformer that you carry with you for the next 50 years could tell you about yourself that you didn't know about yourself. Um, Whether you've forgotten some things and suggesting an earlier intervention um, on dementia, or if it recognizes like you seem to ask these questions about these symptoms a lot, perhaps you should talk to a doctor or something like that. So I think um, with almost every disease, the earlier you catch it, the better the outcome is. So I would be interested to see how something that's not specifically tasked with improving a human's health might pick up on clues that friends and our family and ourselves don't even notice, and surfaces those and wouldn't feel as judged or something like that. So that's my take. Kyle, I see that your hand is up. Is it a Q&A type question, or is it relevant to the topic at hand? And you're also on mute. This is where we find out that Kyle isn't actually a human. It's an AI that is on mute, that shows up to meetings and disrupts everything. Uh, how about we'll
Kyle,
address your question shortly, Kyle?
Kyle, if you push down on your space bar and hold it, that should unmute you for a little bit, unless you're on your phone, which is difficult to do. You're on your phone. Okay.
All right. Well, I
Uh,
promise we'll get to it when the technology allows.
So
I'm
Brian, Kyle is a pharmacy student, and I'm going to assume that he had a comment based on what Jessica was saying on the A. Yeah, he's agreeing with me with the AI and the how to kind of talk about uh, uh, detailed patient history and medical interactions and stuff like that. I'm going to assume that's what Kyle rose his hand for. So yeah, he'll hopefully be able to respond. But yeah, just to let you know that that's probably what the question was.
was that close? I'm going to ask to unmute Kyle and see what happens. Did that just send somebody a notification? Could be a meeting level thing. Oh, mic isn't working. Okay. Kyle, if you disappear, we'll wait till you come back and we'll talk to you then. The last thing I had on our agenda after this future vision was to kind of close it out with any key takeaways. And I think an interesting version of this, I think, would be how would our experience in AI implementations apply to, um, say, a student at KGI in terms of like what to study or uh, career preparedness. So I'll pick on you first, Arun. Do you have any takeaways for how a KGI student might prepare for an AI future?
Yeah, I really value my KGI education, to be very honest. I don't think what I realized was that, getting very deep into a subject, is a good thing to do, but the breadth allows you to kind of move across different things, especially in my role right now. Like I'm not focused in the provider ecosystem. I'm not focused just on the pharma. I'm focused across healthcare and life sciences, right? So I can do anything from protein to protein interaction to medical devices to, to obviously, the pharma side and the provider side. And a lot of that was kind of the basis that I got out of KGI. It also kind of like allowed me to the hands-on projects that we had were actually super, super helpful for me. Coming from a computer engineering background, did not have, a lot of experience with medical devices. We did tours of Edward Life Sciences around thoracic grafts, this, that, the TMP was amazing. We did one with Northrop Grumman around lysing anthrax. Like there were so many cool things that we did that to this day, I'm not joking. I use the experience at KGI as an example in meetings. I won't say like, I would say, oh yeah, I know this because of this, 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 right? So I think like you can make it what you want to, which I think I tell everyone, like, if you really want to do this and you involve yourself and you learn and you kind of have that growth mindset, like you will absorb everything. Like kind of Ryan said, be a sponge, right? Just absorb everything. And as you go through your career, it gives you a lot of flexibility and you can figure out what you want to do. My path has not been linear, so it's been like a lot of luck, honestly, a lot of the right place, right time. But I never doubted myself working in healthcare. Like I knew I could make it work just because of the education that I had. And I'm not saying this just to say this. I really do value, a lot of that I gained from KGI.
Very cool. Yeah. Jessica, any takeaways that might help KGI students in an AI future?
Yeah, I mean, totally agree, that I I'm just so fortunate to have gotten the education I got from KGI, and I feel like I kind of graduated in a weird time where I was like kind of like one of the last classes before, generative AI was really a thing, like that it was super popular. So I mean, I'm sure that they're going to adapt, say, the MSGDA program to kind of, account for those things. And I guess, um, just be careful when you're using it, I suppose. Because just from a faculty side, we do have to, be careful and that you're not relying on AI for everything. But I definitely think it's a super helpful tool that you should experiment with. And hopefully, the courses now at KGI, regardless of the program, are kind of integrating AI usage. So, yeah, take it all in.
Yep, that's great. And I don't have anything to add that I territory that you both covered, but I in my own career being getting very good at something, I think tends to help your career in whatever you do. And there are people who study career progressions and give advice and stuff like that. And there's one individual in particular um, named Cal Newport who's a faculty, I think at Stanford, but has done research on all this. And basically, he was saying the worst advice that you could give someone is follow your passion or whatever. And like as career advice, that's challenging. And he would say the better version of that is get really good at something. And it turns out very often when you're good at something, that ends up being something that you like and that you can monetize really well. And I'd say that's been part of my journey. And like Arun said, mine has not been linear at all. Um, and yeah, so that would be my takeaway, I suppose.
That was one of my
So
favorite
I
books,
think,
Ryan. It's like so good they can't ignore you, right? The Steve
yep,
Martin quote.
yep,
Yeah. So that's all you need to do. Yeah.
yeah. And I think at this point we can open it up to Q&A. So be prepared to unmute. And Kyle, I think you may have earned the first shot at this, and then we'll get to your question, Justin, and then I think, yeah, it looks like Kyle, you had the one question that Arun had agreed to address about Epic, if that still needs addressing, and then the question that you most recently had about was drug-drug interactions.
Yes, the drug-drug interactions. I feel like it was partially answered by when Arun, you mentioned that Epics has a horrible interface, and people that aren't necessarily technology minded, as I perhaps just demonstrated there by being unable to mute myself or unmute myself. Well, I guess like is that the reason why there's still plenty of room for other players to sort of get into health systems?
So I think I mean, it's a great question. I mean, Epic started as a financial instrument to help with reimbursement, right? And then over a period of time, it just captured so much data that it became an electronic health record. I think the way that their business and their technology is structured, it doesn't like they gate everything, right? Like you cannot become and to be honest, Microsoft announced a big partnership with them around around the ambient scribe stuff. So we are working with them and they've been a great partner and everything, but at the same time, like it's not like an open platform that anyone can go and build. So they have like a app ecosystem called App Orchard, but again, they have to let you in. There's just a lot of stuff that like a lot of hoops you have to jump through as a startup, right? As a big tech company, again, you have a lot more flexibility to go in and develop these deals. But I think what's interesting is that so let's take a comparative with that real quick. Is that you have Epic with their strategy where they have they're building their own AI playground and they're outsourcing right in somewhere they're using Microsoft technology and whatnot. But that is because they haven't built it in-house, which is very rare for Epic. They usually do it. Now you look at Cerner that's been bought by Oracle. They've changed their whole EHR approach, saying that this is an AI EHR. Like they're going all in on AI. They're going to rebuild Cerner, the Cerner essentially to be AI friendly from the get-go. It's going to be interesting to see how, kind of merges, but you can see like how the AI boom has shifted the strategy of these companies significantly for like Epic. We haven't seen in decades them do something like this. And with Cerner just totally changing, what they're going to do in order to be competitive in this market. So yeah, that's probably what I would say. So,
Thank you. I
yeah.
just tried to mute myself and
Yeah.
stop the video. I'm so sorry.
No worries.
Yeah, okay. We're glad to hear the question, and yeah, sorry I implied you weren't a human earlier. Um, Justin, I see that your question is here. It seems I think you articulated the question well. Did you want to address it or ask it on
No, I think,
on?
yeah, I guess I can say it out loud. I've seen, since I graduated, a lot of KGI students have found interest in AI related careers. Some have even gone to like traditional PhD programs after their MBS program to explore using AI in bioscience. More so because when they go on careers pages for a lot of these biopharma startups or a company like Amgen, they require a PhD in some sort of computational science. So I was wondering, like, what would be your suggestion to kind of like work around that? Maybe really um, showcase like what you've learned with your MBS degree, or is there um, is there no way around that? Are we kind of evolving with AI and the need? Um, Now we're in 2025.
I have about three different answers to that question that I could start with. One of them is um, it's going to be a lot harder at a big company to make an impact. And so, like, if you start at a small company and you um, get good at something, not to imply that you're not now, but like you become a, an advanced practitioner of something, it's going to be a lot easier to get hired into a big company based on experience. And and I also have a kind of a cynical take on like I wish I had the numbers here, but like how many people on LinkedIn are AI experts now, and like how it boomed over the past 2 or 3 years when people realized you can start making some money at it. So people with skill sets that are non-technical would claim to be AI experts, and I've met people like that, and they just have found like a really great way to apply something that should be common knowledge to a problem that someone just doesn't have the bandwidth to figure out because they're too busy doing other work to keep the lights on and stuff like that. So one answer I would say, start small, get really good at something. Don't target a big company right away. Um, Another one is if you end up at a big company not doing an AI specific role, get very good at using AI as a partner in the work that you're doing so that everyone in your team or your department can be like, oh, Justin did this really cool thing with AI. And word gets around pretty fast if people know that you're the person who figured out how to save everybody 10 hours a week or something like that. Um, is number two. And number three is just go vibe code a startup, baby. Make your own thing. That's probably the not quite as good, but people do that and do very well.
Yeah. I think just to be tactical, I think like there's a lot of roles in big tech that are not just product and engineering. Like, I mean, we have solution architects that are PhD in bioinformatics. We have developer evangelists who are the same. Like, what's really people don't understand, like, it's not very as structured as, you have product engineering science. Like, there's a lot of different roles in larger companies. But I do agree with Ryan. Like, if you're trying to get your foothold, just start small, build, learn, join a place that's okay with making mistakes, I think, because you're going to make a lot of them. And as you kind of go through that progression, become more confident in your skill set. And, at least for the MBS degree like you brought, I was comfortable going from devices to pharma, be comfortable making those shifts and just trust yourself to learn, but be willing to get your hands dirty because to Ryan's point, there's a lot of people who say they're AI experts, but I can tell you, like, I mean, I can bring everything back to some sort of regression out of them, to be very honest, a linear regression, right? So like in the end, just be confident, build, make mistakes, learn, keep iterating, and then eventually those opportunities will show up. One of the stories I tell people is that at least when I was at Amazon, like the head of sales was a speech pathologist. The head of like probably the biggest side of commerce was a philosophy major. I mean, you can really define your own path, and so it just comes down to having the right aptitude and attitude, and I think you'll do fine.
Yeah, when I was hiring, and again, I've never worked at a large pharma company, but when I was hiring, um, I think I hired two without knowing their major. It was just like more of a discussion on culture fit and interest because um, the I won't say entry level, but lower level positions that you can climb in very easily are um, really do you seem like a person who can figure things out, and are you someone who's going to be easy to work with? And if the answer to both of those is yes, it can be not too challenging to find a job. And to echo what Arun said, I hired two music majors, one psych major, and one philosophy major. Were I think maybe four of my last or my most recent hires. And again, I didn't interrogate what their major was or anything like that before I hired them.
That's why one of my best PMs was a teacher. So yeah.
All right, let's open it up to questions. I know, I think the instructions went out that everyone on the call should have two questions for the Q&A at least. Is that what you said, Elizabeth? Well, let's just stick to one of those if anybody wants to bring one of their questions that they have.
I think Jared had a question when building, sorry, on the LLMs, decide what can be tried LLM versus hard coding solutions into the tool. Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on what decision the LLM is making and if that decision needs to be reviewed by a human. But for example, like if you're looking at like basic protein-protein interactions that are, kind of well known, the model should be able to pick up on that. But anything more complicated, you'd want a human to review it. You need to build in those, kind of the guardrails into the model. Microsoft, one of the approaches we have like safety guardrails for our models where if we think the answer is not like aligned with how we've trained it and kind of like our own feedback loop, we actually, flag it and we have a certain degree of accuracy that's associated with the answer. So you can use that. But it's a good question. You're going to have to build around it. You can't take an LLM as it is and assume it's going to do everything you need to do. So you're going to have to build that kind of framework around it.
Ezra, I saw your hand up next. Do you want to ask away?
Yeah, thank you. So you just mentioned like breaking into the industry with a non-technical background, and Arun even said he hired a teacher as a project manager, which makes sense. So teaching was my first consulting job. What did you actually like look for in these candidates, if not the major? Did they have like a project or something, or what was about them that sort of like made you interested?
I mean, she was a teacher. She went to, do her master's and then came out of that. But I think the biggest thing was that application, passion, willingness to learn. I think like to be honest, you can if someone if someone is working at like kind of this level, you assume the aptitude, the ability to learn is there. The soft skills become super important as a PM. Because in the end, you're dealing with engineering science, a lot of egos, leadership. I mean, it's a constant grind. You're being pulled in many directions. Clarity of thought is super important. And at least for me personally, I look at good writing skills. For me, that's, being very clear and to the point is super important for me. But she got a little more experience after she was a teacher in tech, and so that helped as well. But again, she started small. She was at a startup, and then another startup, then joined Apple. Like it was a progression, right? And I think like again, the best advice I can give you is like careers are built in like it's marathons, not sprints. So play the long game, right? Just always remind yourself, just play the long game, and you'll do fine.
Yeah, I would add part of that and I'm 100% sure you're going to agree with this, Rune, but it's also building your network as you go.
100%.
And so um, even if you're in a role that you're not passionate about and you don't want to be there very long, do a great job at it, and uh, that'll pay off down the road. And I think regardless of the topic. Kyle, do you want to ask another one?
Yes. I know it's only two questions, so I'll try to combine as much as I have into this. First things first, to talk about Jessica, when you mentioned using ChatGPT to, use DDIs and check your patient's, your grandmother's medication and all that. I was recently at a CSHP seminar just over the weekend, and it's a seminar for PharmDs. And it went from having like one lecture about AI last year to having 6 or 7 different lectures about AI, and a committee that they're forming, like still relatively small, about AI. And one of the things that they're trying to figure out is exactly, yes, AI can do that. AI can, use the guidelines and be accurate. But, in the event that something's wrong, either, it uses an outdated guideline or it hallucinates, uh, where does the liability come into play? And I know Epics is using like sort of an AI, not just an AI scribe, but basically when you bring up a patient's profile, it gives you like a quick summary of everything the patient has, what medication they're taking, and a pharmacist who works at a hospital who's kind of testing everything out already saw that it already made a mistake. It said that the patient needed insulin when the patient was not diabetic. So, that could very quickly cause a very bad reaction. Um, that wasn't really a question, just like sort of like, further. And I don't know who's really going to be answering that, if that's, like probably a legal pharmacovigilance question. And sorry, on to the actual question. Earlier I asked, there's an app called, or a AI program called a bridge, but there's also others like that were discussed, like Augmedix, Suki, DeepScribe, Ambience, and of course the one that you're working on, Arun. Maybe this is just a basic business question, but so obviously these are all equal competitors. Why would one company go for one product over the other? And yeah.
Yeah. As an ex-startup founder, it sucks saying this, but it's true. Microsoft will be there for a very long time, right? And sometimes in provider, and I fought that battle as a startup founder, trying to convince hospitals to use my behavioral health solution, but at the same time, like they don't know, are you going to last, and hospitals don't make these IT decisions very quickly. I think things are changing, to be very honest, like, in a good way. Like I think they're changing where they're willing to go through faster cycles of looking at vendors. But in the case that they're not, and especially if it's going to be attached to Epic and the relationship that Microsoft has with Epic, it's harder for a lot of these startups to get into the bigger markets, right? Epic has 40% market share, Cerner maybe 30, Allscripts maybe 10, 15. Then there's like hundreds of EHRs, right? So there's still opportunity there. But so that's one issue. The other thing is, what is the exit opportunity for a lot of these companies? If it's not acquisition, then are they IPO-able companies? So I think that also is something that is important. So now if you look at the scribe space, everyone's going towards revenue cycle management because that's where the money is, right? That's where they want to improve. So you'll see that shift happening with a lot of these ambient companies. But I think the big thing is that, like, sometimes brand name and ability to put dollars behind it really helps. And, it's an unfortunate, thing. But I think these companies will evolve. They'll start doing something else. They'll find other use cases to go after. And hopefully they're nimble enough to do it, like, in the long term, because, having the competition is important.
Mhm. And I'll raise my hand again in case someone else has another question.
Kyle, do you have a question?
Yes, as a follow-up. So I guess this is just another question of it. I'm currently taking Dr. Casper's Intro to Bio industry science. I'm learning about whole, during the 2000s, a whole genomics, and a lot of startups, like their entire goal was to just get acquired by Amgen or like one of the big pharma companies. I guess my question is like, let's say you create an AI solution to a pain point, it's really popular. What stops, let's say Microsoft, with all the resources from just basically copying what you're doing?
I
I
don't.
I have an
Go
outsider
ahead.
perspective,
Oh,
No, no,
which
Ryan,
is
Ryan, go ahead.
uh,
I think you should go first. Yeah.
so um, having been in the like, I spend all my time working on my little company and trying to make it great, and everything I think about it is amazing, and it's such a challenge when someone says no, it's not that great, or oh, I don't, you know, not going to use it. So there's certainly that lens that someone might think it's too good, but I think what Arun alluded to early on the call, like it might just be small potatoes, and if you can make 10 or 20 million a year on something, that doesn't mean Microsoft wants it. I'm not picking on Microsoft. Google might not want it. Like that's you have to go through an M&A process, and you get attorneys involved, and like uh or we build it ourselves in-house, and I need, if you're open AI and you're paying engineers $700,000 a year and you need 5 or 10 of them to work on that, like how quickly can I recoup the 7 to 10 million dollars I put into this thing that may not have as much of a market share in 2 or 3 years? So I think there's a lot of market dynamics that are a part of it too.
Yeah, and I think like I mean the problem the thing that people forget is that like VCs want $1 billion markets, right? Because they want a big return on their investment, right? But what happens with that is that as founders you get diluted a lot more. So like the money that actually comes to the founders and early employees gets much more diluted the more rounds you raise, right? But I think a $250 million exit after a Series A is phenomenal, right? I think, and this is something that it's basically like, sorry, I'll get off my soapbox, but I think it's a problem with the ecosystem where they're not really understanding like how you can still get a 10x exit, right? Which is, I think, phenomenal. IPO is not the only way to go. I think to Ryan's point, if you have an ARR of like 10 million, but you're going after a very particular need, there are thousands of companies that could potentially use that technology and you could still have a good exit, right? So I think it just depends on how you place it. Sometimes acqui-hires work out really well, and that's what OpenAI has been doing to bring in talent and making sure that the exits for those founders, because they're smaller companies, actually works out really well, and even the early employees. So there's so many different ways to go about it, but I think the VC ecosystem kind of limits the type of exits because of what the multiples that they're going after. But I still think there's opportunity if you do it right. So
Yeah, I've been a part of a couple private equity deals, and those are interesting too. I think it's um, filling a niche that a lot of people who started thinking, I think the generation that Arun and I are from, that was the quickest path to being a unicorn, was like cool idea, super technical founders, A round, B round, and then before long, Web 2.0 mindset. You get this many users, then you're worth $1 billion. And private equity is a really interesting player in a lot of this. So when you get to between 10 and 100 million in revenue, depending on what your certain accounting terms are, your EBITDA, some of the other things are, um, private equity often will invest enough money so that a founder can feel like that's exit money, not necessarily IPO money. But then those businesses typically, what makes them a good target is that their revenues can continue to support the carried interest payments, that is that equity leverage that the private equity companies uh, use. So there's that play. That's usually not as exciting because there are a lot more people involved than the a small venture fund would be, or an IPO would be. But I think they're more stable in some ways. So it really depends on what you want, and that should inform the strategy, I think. Are there other questions? That's a terrible way to ask that, by the way. I should say, Alexis, you've been very quiet. Did you have any takeaways or any questions?
No, I don't have any questions. I've just kind of been listening to everybody and their input. It's been very interesting.
Thank you for being here, and I'll ask Michael and Maddie and Hans the same
And
question.
there's another one in the chat from Emmy
Oh, okay.
for Jessica. Emmy, do you want to just ask it or?
Yeah, I can just ask it for ease of recording. So,
Yeah.
my question is specifically for Jessica. So I remember you were mentioning that there are free resources like ClinVar, and they kind of do a similar service as Genomenon, but maybe less thorough because Genomenon is like actively working as keeping their database as updated as possible. So what direction does that take? Variant curation? Like, would we want to standardize the field and only use one search engine? Or, and if so, like, who would have access to the tool? Like, would it have to become monetized and only used for like academia, or would it be open to the public and free or industry or hospitals?
Yeah, so I mean, that's kind of tough, and maybe I'm a little bit biased, but obviously I'm hoping that eventually Mastermind will be the go-to tool for when a physician or anybody who's working in the human genetics field to look up a genetic variant. One of the biggest downsides to ClinVar is that pretty much any laboratory can submit a classification for a variant in ClinVar. It's not vetted by anybody, and sometimes laboratories will just say, "Oh, that we said this variant was a VUS," but they don't tell you like what evidence, because we have a standardized um, set of rules and evidence that we apply to classify variants. So, I mean, if you're a clinician that's trying to get the most accurate classification for your patient, for example, just using something like ClinVar and just going straight off of what's in there might not be the most accurate. So, I mean, there's other companies and places that are kind of trying to do the same thing that Genomenon is doing. We've talked about it before, that this is kind of almost like the Human Genome Project 2.0. Almost is it's kind of the race to see who will have the best curation of the human genome, because that's where genomics is really lagging right now, is the curation bottleneck, I guess. And so we're trying to do it as fast and as efficiently as possible. And so that's why we're utilizing, these different AI tools and different language processing models and so on and so forth. So that way we can be the first, I guess, to have curated the entire human genome. So that way, everybody has heard about Mastermind and they want to go to it. And to the point about um, who could have access to the tool. I mean, right now, we sell licensure for it. We used to have I guess, freemium model where certain individuals would be able to get a certain number of searches per week. But I mean, eventually that could go, you know, um, I don't know. It just depends. I'm not really sure what the future holds for that. But yeah, I mean, we're even getting more into the educational space. So we're super intertwined with the MSGDA program. So we give all students free Mastermind licensure so they can search for any gene. You can search for any disease or any variant in Mastermind. And even if we haven't curated it yet, you'll still be able to find all associated publications with a certain variant, and we're expanding to other educational programs as well that I've kind of been assisting with. So yeah, we're kind of at an exciting time and kind of I guess, a race to curate the human genome.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for the question.
Does anyone have one more quick question? Hans, Maddie, or I know Alexis, you said you didn't have anything, but just, or Michael? Hans, you came off mute.
Yeah, I'm thinking. I
You
guess
don't have to.
was a question or observation. Like I'm kind of coming at all this from the patent attorney perspective, and I see a lot of buzz for sort of some sort of fully automated agentic run laboratory where your models are running tons of experiments on fully automated liquid handling systems, and everything's just run by machines, and then some inventions spit out the other end, and that's going to be like drug discovery or drug development. But I think the patent system, at least, is currently based on some human has to be the inventor. And pharmaceutical exclusivity and patent rights is all driven by, I guess, the commercialization ability is all driven by patent rights. So I think at some point something's going to come to a head where these companies that are trying to fully automate and AI drive everything aren't going to be able to get patents, and then who's going to be able to make money without something shaking out? And I don't know how Orange Book listings are done or what patents are all about. So I don't know if you guys have any perspective on that and what large companies that you've been associated with think about that in terms of the drug discovery pipeline AI piece of this, or whether you guys haven't had any sort of exposure to that.
I mean, we want to build the tools that these companies will use to create that sort of innovation. I don't think we'll be, making patents for, what comes out of it. So that's one approach. That's like the builder approach. But what I would say is like a lot of these Gen AI models are not able to create new things, right? They're regurgitating what they've seen before. And so the way that they've trained is like, and especially now, like we're running out of training data, right? So they're getting, again, some companies are training them on AI generated data. So there's like this really interesting loop. Um, I think there, at least from my perspective, I think there will be a human in the loop. There will need to be a human who's making those decisions, deciding to pull the different data points together to maybe create something novel. For it to do it by itself, I don't think we're there yet. So I mean, fully autonomized like systems like that seem like a stretch. People may be thinking ahead and trying to like patent it, but at least I'm not seeing too much around that. I'm seeing more like method patents, more than I'm actually seeing, that sort of like we're creating this innovation.
Thank you.
Cool, thank you. And we're just about at time. So I just want to say thank you so much to Ryan, Jessica, and Arun for our Beaker speakers. Ryan, you are right. I did learn a lot myself.
Oh, good.
So, and it was very, for me, digestible. And so I'm hoping other people found it to be the same. As well. So I would like to bid you all farewell. Have a very good night. And again, thank you very much to Ryan, Jessica, and Arun.
Yeah, thank you all for being a part of it and having us. I appreciate it. And Jessica and Arun made it very easy to moderate. Thank you for your expertise.
Thanks, everyone. It
Thank
was
you.
nice meeting you
Thank
all.
you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good night.
Bye.